We'll get started here with Tim and then Dave.
Hey, Nick, I wanted to ask you about A.J. Brown. At the end of the game, it looked like he was frustrated on the sidelines. You went over and talked with him. It also appeared like maybe he had tweaked something late in the game. Can you kind of shed some light on that, please?
Yeah, he was going through a little something with his body that that was hurting him. We feel like he'll be ready to go this week, but he was hurting in that game, and so that's why he wasn't in the game. As far as what the first part of that question is, yeah, of course he's always going to want the ball. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, just about the frustration in your conversation with him.
Of course, he's going to always want the ball. He's a really good player, and no one, not really anybody in the pass game really got a lot of targets or a lot of opportunities, and because we were running the ball so well. But that's what you want from your receivers, to want to have the football. There's part of the reason why receivers are good is because they want and crave the football. They want the ball to change the game. But make no mistake about it. He was thrilled that we won the football game. Always wants to be involved, obviously, in the plan. He blocked his butt off. You could see, you see how excited he was when he had that spring. He sprang that block for Devontae's touchdown. So but obviously he's obviously really excited and celebrating in the locker room with all of us after the win.
We'll go to Dave and then Zach.
Hey, Nick, with Jalen Hurts going into this game, 24 years old, an NFC Championship game, that will be a lot for most young players, but it doesn't seem that way for him. Where's your confidence level in his ability and his poise in this moment?
Yeah, no man suddenly becomes different than his cherished thoughts and habits, and that's something that's a line Frank Reich used to always say to me. That Jalen, just because the moment's big doesn't mean, what he means by that is, just because the moment's big doesn't mean he's going to all of a sudden change who he's been for the past 3 years that he's been in Philadelphia, right? He's going to have that same demeanor. You just don't all of a sudden change, right? Just because the situation changes. And we've made that's what we think as a team. And I know Jalen, that's just that he's going to be locked in, and he's going to work and prepare every day to be ready for this game. And he's going to be ready to go. I know that. And just, he's going to be that same calm, steady person that he is each and every week. You just don't automatically change. And so, that's good. That's obviously a really important trait to have as your leader, as your quarterback. Somebody that doesn't ride the waves of the season, doesn't ride the waves of a game. He stays steady and is truly in the moment of the next play.
Go ahead, Zach, and then EJ.
Hey, good afternoon, Nick. Asking about Brock Purdy. I know you're always scouting late round quarterbacks, and you guys have the connections to the Iowa State staff. What did you know about Purdy before he came across your screen this week?
Just that he's a winner, and that obviously I always follow Iowa State in their program because I have so many college teammates and roommates that coach there, and so that was always. I mean, since Matt became the head coach at Iowa State, I've always followed them and obviously stay in touch with Matt. But you saw what he did for that program, right? Matt's obviously a great head coach, but he got a great quarterback in Brock Purdy, and you saw what he did for that program, and all the things he did for I checked the score. Purdy had an awesome game, and they won again, and that's what I noticed, with him, that he's a winner, and then obviously, when you're close with other coaches like that and you have conversations back and forth. This is going back to when Brock was at Iowa State. Like, hey, what are you guys doing? We watched this on tape right here. This looked good, this and that. And so, and the common theme always from them is, hey, we got a quarterback that can lead the way and find the right place to go with the football consistently, who's just a playmaker. And so that's what I knew about him going into, last year's draft process. Obviously, I followed him a lot just because of my relationship with the coaches there.
EJ, and then Chris.
Hey, Nick. A couple of weeks ago, you mentioned that Jalen was really sore after the regular season finale. I guess, how did he come out of this weekend's game, compared to that?
Yeah, we feel like he's continuing to get better. I'll let him answer, how he feels, but we felt like he came out good, and then he can answer how sore he is after this game. But played a good game. We got through healthy, not only Jalen, but the rest of the team. And, so we're excited, obviously, about the health of our football team right now.
Go ahead, Chris, and then John McMullen.
Afternoon, Nick. What's the likelihood that we'll see Avonte Maddox out there on practice during this week? And then secondly, real quick, how do you feel about the secondary's play, especially when it comes to C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, and Marcus Epson, and how they played against the Giants?
Yeah. First part of the question, we'll see. We're hopeful. But, he's still got to get out there and run on the field and do drills. So it's not something that we know quite yet, right? Because there's some unknown of some of the football movements that he has to go out there and do. So we'll see. We'll have more for you this week on that. Bob, you said I got more media obligations this week. I got more media obligations this week, so I'm going to be able to answer more questions. The second part, Chris, you asked, how did I feel like the secondary played? I felt like they played really well. And I think we've just been getting consistent play out of that entire group. Obviously, a credit to Coach Gannon, Coach Denard Wilson's a great, and DK, really good DB coaches. I really think Coach Wilson, I got a second to brag on Gannon after the game, and now let me brag on Coach Denard. He's just a great leader of men, and he's able to bring a group together. I look at Coach Denard like a really good offensive line coach, where you got to bring them all together. They all got to play as one, and that's a really important position to make sure you're doing this. And Denard's really good at that. And the guys and obviously we have really good players there with James and Slay and Reed and Marcus and CJ. And Avonte and the depth Kayvon's play have given really meaningful reps this year, right? And so we've got a good depth there too. So a tribute to Howie of bringing all these guys in. But I thought they played an outstanding game. Just being around the ball and denying the football. And then making the tackles necessary. I thought we played physical. And I think Chauncey's done a really nice job of stepping in the nickel position. That's so important. Like we have these guys that can play multiple spots, right? And that really has helped us as we've gotten dinged a little bit, with Avonte, of being able to move Chauncey in there. And you have Josiah Scott that we trust as well, that's contributed on special teams and given us some meaningful reps as well. And so you can't say enough about the coaching that they've gotten from Denard and DK. And then again, just Slay's the leader back there. Of just bringing the guys together as well. James has been a great addition. I go on and on about how good this group has been. And I do believe that it's that iron sharpens iron, Chris. We're really good in the secondary, and we're really good at wide out, and they've made each other better through the battles that they've won against, that they've done all year, similar to our O-line, D-line. You look at training camp, you take yourself back to training camp and the battles that Lane and Hassan had in training camp, right? And how much better they made each other. And so it's just, when you have that competition and the depth and the players that we have, that's a great thing when they're making each other better mentally and physically.
Go ahead, John, and then Jeff.
Hi, Nick. Curious as an offensive coach, how much you paid attention to Kyle over the years. Obviously, he's got a reputation in this league when it comes to scheming and play calling. Curious how much you pay attention to other guys who are in that position, and him specifically.
Sure, you always are studying, good coaches, whether that is, what makes them go as far as mentally, or as far as their scheme, or as just a coach, the relationships, all the other stuff about coaching. And obviously with him, he's always been been a guy that has a great reputation in the NFL, and he is a great offensive coordinator, great offensive mind. And so, of course, you watch a lot of their tape. I remember watching, obviously I have close ties with Pierre Garçon. And when Pierre played for him, I remember watching all his catches, just being a Mount Union guy. And maybe that was one of my first times to really study Kyle's offense. And I remember coming away very impressed, obviously, with all the plays that Pierre made, my fellow Purple Raider, but also the scheme in which they were getting it with him. And then, we've had, I had Brian Hoyer as well, who also played for Kyle and played, meaningful snaps for him in San Francisco. And I believe somewhere else too. I can't quite remember where, but I remember how much he, when you're with quarterbacks, you have a lot of different conversations about schemes and all those different things. And I just remember how highly Brian Hoyer thought of Kyle. And I remember asking him questions, what Kyle do in this scenario or that scenario? And so just highly impressed with him as a football coach. I don't know him all that well, just to say hello. And, I've heard nothing but great things of him as a person as well. But got a lot of respect for him as a football coach and all the success that he's had. He's been around the game his entire life. I really, obviously at a different level at Southwestern High School, I was as well. And so I know some of the things that he probably had to go through growing up, and we get exposed to a lot as coaches' sons. So I got a lot of respect for him and with him as a football coach.
Go ahead, Jeff, and then Jimmy.
Nick, looking at the advanced numbers here of Demeco Ryans' defense, he doesn't blitz much. He doesn't play a lot of man defense. Kind of sprinkles it up with his zone coverages. It sounds a lot in terms of Gannon's.
So it's the number 1 and number 2 ranked defenses in the NFL, and they don't blitz a lot. They don't play any man. Okay, just wanted to make sure I was hearing that right.
Yeah, right. And then, so what are some other characteristics that really define his scheme?
I see. One of the most impressive things about coaches that I see sometimes is when their guys are just selling out for them. And I really see that with Demeco Ryans' defense. I see his players genuinely selling out, and you can see their interactions in the game, right? When you watch it on television, you see those guys playing really hard for him. Well, why does a player play really hard for a coach? Well, I think one thing that happens is they really recognize that coach cares about them as a person. They really recognize that coach is genuinely making them better. So again, am I in there in meetings and hearing how Demeco Ryans is making guys better? No, but I see it obviously that he is doing that, and that these guys love to play for him. And so that speaks a lot to Demeco, Coach Ryan, because he's gotten the most. He's got, obviously, and they got really good players, but he's gotten a lot out of those guys. And so it's no surprise to me that he's one of the hot head coaching candidates coming up for this year. And I got a lot of respect for that. This is a really well coached football team. A really well coached football team. And we'll have to be on our stuff this week.
Go ahead, Jimmy, and then Martin.
Hey, Nick, on the really good players point, what is your first impressions of their personnel? I guess notably their linebackers, Fred Warner and Drake Greenlaw. And then not to do the 2-question thing, but we're also going to need an update on what your food of choice was for the Niners-Cowboys game.
Little Caesars. Little Caesars this time. As far as the players, man, this is a talented team. Obviously you mentioned those two guys, and I got a lot of respect for them. And then they got good players all across the defensive line, headlined by Bosa and Armstead. Their corners. They got the guy from Kansas City that I thought was a really good player there last year as we were watching guys that were free agents. The safeties it can really cause havoc in there. And then not to mention the offensive line that they have, and the skill players that they have. They have unique skill players with Debo and McCaffrey and Kittle. I really liked Brandon Ayuk coming out of Arizona State. I remember thinking very highly of him. And you can tell Kyle does a good job of really coaching the details to the wide receivers. You see him running good routes, really detailed routes. So, again, just going back to their coaches and how good they are. But, a lot of good playmakers on this football team, right? A lot of good playmakers on this football team offensively and defensively. And it's no surprise that they've won all these games in a row. They got good coaches. They got good players. And so – we're going to have a plan and obviously that's what we're working on now to make sure that they're good players, don't wreck game. That's what you always look at hey, here's their really good players. How do we make sure this guy doesn't wreck the game? And, but we got good players too. And we're excited about the matchups that I think you're going to see a lot of really good matchups in this game of really good on good. There's a lot of good on good out there that's going to be happening in this game, and so, that's what the NFC Championship game should be. It's going to be good on good, and it's going to be tight, and so, again, we got to put our guys in the best spots to be able to make plays and make sure we're containing some of those guys I just mentioned.
Go ahead, Martin, then Rube.
Hey, Nick. I noticed, the other day you made a reference to Jalen and Michael Jordan and everything, and I was wondering if that was something that you might have noticed about Jalen, when you were scouting him while you were in Indy, he was coming out of college, and also if you might have talked to Matt Campbell about the 2019 game between Oklahoma and Iowa State in which Jalen and Brock Purdy kind of went head-to-head.
Jalen won that one, right? 42-41. I remember watching that game.
Yeah, missed point conversion or something.
Matt and I may be good friends, and we are good friends. But every game that Brock Purdy plays well in, I think that's good for recruiting classes at Iowa State. So I'm not asking him because I'm not sure I'm going to get the great info from him, or I'm going to get all the info from him because if the Eagles play good, how does that help Iowa State? It doesn't. But if Purdy plays good, it's going to help him. But and so obviously again I'm teasing there, but going back, that game I do remember watching that game, and then both quarterbacks really played well. Martin, your first part of that question.
It was mostly about your Michael Jordan reference the other day. If that was something you noticed in Jalen when you were looking at him coming out of college, and when he finally became that.
Yeah, when you compare something like that, you're thinking about, right? I mean, Michael Jordan's the best basketball player of all time, and I get arguments back and forth with our players. I think. In my opinion, right? Because my height of watching I'm not trying to start a debate here or anything like that. But in my opinion, my height of watching basketball and who I always wanted to be as a kid growing up was Michael Jordan. And so, I don't think I'm going to get many arguments that he's the best basketball player of all time. But the things that Michael Jordan, you were able to see a lot of things about him in that the Last Dance thing, about his competitiveness and about his just desire and will to win. And so when you make that comparison, you think, again, when you guys ask me about Jalen, the first thing as good as he's played this year, right, as well as he's run the football, as well as he's thrown the football, reading defenses, accurate throws, as well as he's done all that, what you notice first about him is his will to win, his competitive drive. And so that comparison is kind of in that aspect of it. Was I around Michael Jordan? No, but I was able to watch from afar when I was a kid. But then also you're able to watch these documentaries and you see that common denominator of those things. The first thing you asked me about Jalen, I always talk about is all those things, all the intangibles that he has. And so that's where that, that's where that's coming from, is just that will to win. Like, it's at a different level. He had that big chain on. What did it say? A breed of one. He's a breed of one. Like that's who he is. Like, he's unlike anybody I've been around, just with how much he loves this game, how much the winning drives him, how much getting better every day drives him, how much, leading drives him. Like, he's special. He is a special dude. And that's where really I was coming from with that, in the sense of like, man, these guys they're built different. They're built different as far as how they go about their business and how they go about, prepping for games and compete in games and steady during games. That's what I was speaking of there, Martin.
We have time for two more, so we'll go to Rube and then Josh.
Hey, Nick, I wanted to ask you about Tracy Rocker. We've talked a lot about the D-line and their production. He doesn't say a lot to us. What's he like? How does he resonate with the players? And, what have you seen from him?
Yeah, I think Coach Rocker is a great coach. He's very detailed in what he does. He gets the guys trust him. The guys like playing for him. The other day, last week, I couldn't sleep. Obviously, just thinking about what I'm going to say to the team, this and that, right? And I'm like, I woke up at like 2:30 in the morning. I just couldn't go back to sleep. So I go in and I'm in the office at 4:00. I'm like, what else am I going to do? I'm just going to lay in here in bed. I mean, I can watch some tape on the Giants. And I'm pulling in at 4:00, and walking in right before me was Coach Rocker. And I'm like, I'm a little embarrassed. Coach Rocker, shoot. And then so I was like, man, who was going in at 4:00? It was Coach Rocker. And then and everybody was like, yeah, he always does that. That's when he goes in. And so he grinds. He's doing everything he can do to put these guys in positions to help them, to help them make plays. And so, and then with Coach, him being the former player that he was, he's been, and he'd been in those scenarios, been in these big games. He can relate to these guys in different ways as well. And so I just always, I got a lot of respect for him and all the things that he's done, and I'm happy he's on our staff. You ever seen his hands, Rube?
Yeah.
You ever seen his hands, Rube?
I have seen his hands.
They're jacked up beyond belief. Like, you can tell how good of it. I think that's how you determine how. And then Sweaty's hands are like that too. Like, you determine how good a D lineman was by how jacked up their hands were. So if I didn't get to see him play in the 80s, but judging by his hands, he was a monster over there at Auburn.
Go ahead, Josh.
Hey, Nick, I was wondering, given how much you guys stress and rep ball security on the contrast side of that, how much of messaging is taught, or is it just natural in regards to yards after the catch, especially with two guys like A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert, and specifically on Goddard, just building on that question, how naturally is it for him with the stiff arms specifically?
Yeah, that's something you try to teach them, where to have the ball, right? What arm to have the ball in so they can utilize that stiff arm. So there's a lot of technique and fundamentals to it. And we try to put it in their minds, in practice, like, hey, you catch the ball, right? You tuck and get it to the proper fundamentals of how we teach you to hold it. And then you burst for three lines. So when I say 3 lines, that's 15 yards, right? You burst for 3 lines to get in that habit of finishing every play. And that's something, actually, I tell you, I like to watch documentaries of all type. And there was a Larry Fitzgerald documentary, A Football Life, I think. And basically, one of my old bosses, Todd Haley, was said to him, he's like, what? Hey, why don't you kind of be like, in the documentary, he's like, why don't you be like Anquan Bolden and just become this bull when you get the ball in your hands, right? And so our point, we show that every time we talk about finishing, because Larry said, I took that personal and I started finishing in practice and I started finishing in games. And so the art of finishing, we definitely preach and we talk about. Now, a lot of the yards after catch, sometimes you're going to get yards after catch because of the scheme, right? And there's sometimes the scheme doesn't allow for as much. And then, but you got to also understand in yards after catch, a lot of that is innate ability. Like if you went back and looked at Mount Union in 2003, you saw a lot of number 25 wide receiver catching the ball and then stepping out of bounds. I had no innate ability to create any yards after catch. This innate ability is a big part of it, right? Of feeling where to go with the ball, being, having the ball protected, being able to make the guy miss. Like Devontae has an innate ability with the ball in his hands. He's made some really good plays with the ball in his hands, and we got these guys, right? You mentioned AJ, you mentioned Dallas. Those two guys, they do it differently, right? Devontae has this punt returner ability to him of feeling instinctual where the lanes are. AJ and Devontae have this, AJ and Dallas have this bull mentality of like, come tackle me. Like I'm a big running back. Come tackle me if you're there. And so, yards after catch is talked a lot about because what better way for a quarterback than to throw the ball 5 yards and then let the receiver get 15 more yards off of that. That's a nice feeling as a quarterback. It's talked a lot about. You obviously are always trying to teach the fundamentals and detail of it, but there's a lot of the innate ability of the player as well.
All right. Thanks for your time, Coach.
Thanks, everybody.